Good day, everyone, and thank you so much for joining this regional multi-stakeholder meeting of the Global Agenda for Sustainable Livestock, or GASL. This is an opportunity for a wide diversity of livestock sector actors, civil servants, representatives, governments, officials, livestock keepers, and other stakeholders from this region to meet face-to-face and online to identify the priorities of the livestock sector for this region as a major contributor to the sustainability of future food systems. My name is Shirley Tarawali, and I'm chair of the Global Agenda for Sustainable Livestock. I'm also Assistant Director General at ILRI, the International Livestock Research Institute based in Kenya. The Global Agenda for Sustainable Livestock is a multi-stakeholder partnership that brings together all typologies of livestock sector stakeholders, from smallholders to commercial and everything in between, and different types of organizations, NGOs, governments, academia, private and public sector, civil society, and multilateral organizations. It aims to assemble evidence, foster dialogue and consensus around livestock issues to support practice and policy change towards livestock solutions that contribute to development ambitions. So today's meeting is one of 8 regional consultations that we anticipate taking place across the world between now, June, and August, before the global hybrid multi-stakeholder meeting of the Global Agenda for Sustainable Livestock that will take place in early October in Dublin, Ireland, and virtually. So regional meetings such as this provide an opportunity for participants such as yourselves to take stock of the livestock sector achievements, single out key challenges, and identify priority actions that will significantly contribute to reaching sustainable food systems and achieving sustainable development goals through attention to evidence, dialogue, and change in practice and policy. The global meeting, we hope, will be the first face-to-face opportunity for some to meet up in this context for quite a number of years. And we also encourage online participation. And the meeting will be set up to facilitate maximum engagement, regardless of whether you're in the room or connecting virtually. It'll be an opportunity to bring together the outputs from regional consultations, such as this one, in the context of challenges the livestock sector must face and the actions it must take towards greater sustainability. The meeting will consider achievements, especially examples from regional situations, so as to help emphasize and conceptualize the diversity. Make forward-looking commitments to future actions that are essential for livestock as any other sector to contribute to sustainable, resilient, inclusive food systems, exactly as we describe in the vision for the global agenda that says, by 2030, sustainable, inclusive, resilient, and diverse livestock systems across the world contribute significantly to sustainable development goals of the UN Agenda 2030 and are integral to sustainable food systems. The main objective of that global meeting later in the year is to bring together diverse, multiple stakeholders across the global livestock sector and to really take that opportunity to display and commit to actions towards that more sustainable, inclusive, resilient livestock systems as part of the work that everybody's doing towards global food system transformation. We really want to use that to profile achievements and to commit to action. Just a very brief word from me about the context for the regional and global meetings to help frame today's deliberations. During 2021, the Global Agenda for Sustainable Livestock, through engaging in processes around the Food Systems Summit, through multiple regional and global consultations, garnered inputs from right across the livestock sector around the world. And we use those inputs to guide the development of a new action plan that describes outcomes for the global agenda in the context of a theory of change. A theory of change based on three spheres: a sphere of control, what we do and deliver; a sphere of influence, how we engage with stakeholders to help shape knowledge, actions, and attitudes towards more sustainable livestock; and a sphere of interest, supporting the inclusion of sustainable livestock options to contribute to global development challenges. And though the outcomes are framed, as I mentioned already, around evidence and practice change, around dialogue, and around policy change. But we also bring into that picture sustainability domains that relate to those bigger global development challenges, coalescing around four areas: food and nutrition security, livelihoods and economic growth, animal health and welfare, climate and natural resource use. So I encourage you to have these in mind and help them frame your discussions today. Because for livestock, we recognize that, as with many sectors, there is a need to change. But what that change looks like towards those ambitious food systems of the future is as diverse as the livestock sector itself. We need to keep these in mind during today's discussions and going forward. The need for change, but that there's a huge diversity of pathways that demand equally diverse actions towards sustainability, finding powerful ways that the livestock sector can contribute towards food systems that are stronger, more sustainable, equitable, and so on. Thank you so much to the organizers. Really, many thanks to all of you for taking time to join. I do hope you'll find it a stimulating and thought-provoking time, and an action-oriented discussion as well. And one that will continue over the coming months. And hopefully I can meet you in person or online in October to bring your deliberations, your contributions into a global context. Do have a fantastic meeting. Thank you.
Very good. Well, welcome everybody. Good afternoon to almost everybody. And thank you, Eduardo, in Rome, for getting up in the early morning to help us with all of the arrangements for this meeting. And thanks especially also to Liz Wedderburn, who really put the meeting together, organized many of the participants, and has really been the driving force organizing this. So I will not talk very much longer. I'm Rory Peter from the Global Roundtable for Sustainable Beef, but I think we have to move straight into our speakers because we have a fairly limited time for this whole meeting. So first of all, on market drivers, I'd like to welcome Ian McConnell, first of all, the Director of Sustainability with Tyson Foods, obviously in the meat sector. So Ian, I'd like to hear from you for 10 or so minutes on market drivers in Tyson.
Thanks very much, Rory. And it's exciting to be back at GASL events after a couple of years off. I think these meetings have been some of the most interesting meetings, not just for the locations, but the breadth of people that usually come together at these meetings. So not only these regional ones, but as we progress towards the MSP that Shirley mentioned in Dublin, Ireland, any of you that can get to those meetings will no doubt get a lot out of it. I want to speak briefly for 10 minutes today, and excuse me for not using slides for a short presentation slot such as this one, but I want to firstly just reshape the term market driver. I think often we think of market drivers as demands, as imposts brought down the supply chain on producers. And I think it's important that we reshape that thinking, that market drivers in particular, we should think of as opportunities. They are opportunities being recognized by people further down the supply chain as avenues to add more value to our product, and also ensure that our products in livestock remain viable, attractive to consumers who are looking more and more to consume more sustainable and healthy products. So when we look at market drivers, it really is just a transparent and honest communication of what is happening in the market space for the supply chain, and recognizing that those demands now and moving into the future need to be done collectively and achieved collectively through the supply chain. And I think that's an important framing to think of these things positively, because certainly at Tyson, we see a future in which having more valid and robust information around the sustainability of our livestock products to the consumer allows us to sell more of it. It allows us to add more value to it, but it also allows us to make sure it stays viable as a protein choice to people around the world. And we think that is a very crucial part of the future food system. As a company, and as most companies who are moving in sustainability and livestock, we share a very common framework for sustainable development, those being the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals. Obviously here at GASL, those become very fundamental because of the intergovernmental space, but also they are a really useful way to frame and align sustainability initiatives and sustainability reporting to allow us to speak a simple language, a constant and consistent language to those who are making, whether it be policy, purchasing, or judgment decisions around livestock. So that common framework becomes really important. We also, as I said, believe that animal protein plays a vital and very crucial role for not only human health, but economic and social development also. Livestock still continues to employ the majority of the world's poor. It still tends to be the largest protein source, especially in developing countries. And we need to be able to ensure that that protein, as supply chains and food systems develop around the world, and we as private sectors become more and grow into more markets, and I'm thinking specifically for Tyson, that providing animal protein in those markets is seen as a positive solution to food security, food availability, hunger and poverty. As we do that, we're going to need to be credible, robust, and clear and transparent around the sustainability of our products to do that. And that's why we have a lot of initiatives in place to begin measuring and communicating the sustainability efforts across our supply chain. But communicating across that supply chain is going to need a lot of collaboration, a lot of shared information, a lot of shared action. The big challenge for us is we hold, in the case of especially beef and pork, we hold control of that product for up to a couple of weeks. It's been at livestock producers for up to a couple of years. It's been at suppliers to us for a couple of weeks, and it may be with a consumer and a customer for just a couple of hours. Yet that communication of value, sustainability, quality needs to be shared right across that value chain. So collaborating on efforts that enable us to know more about the way products are produced, the impacts, the benefits that those products are supplying to natural ecosystems, to societal outcomes, to human health, are really important for us to maintain that value in the market and attract customers to the product. So when I look at that, and I look at our key pillars of sustainability, I see there are some things we can move on quite quickly that our market is beginning to demand, and that we see in the short to medium future will enable us to add value to products, or converse to that, ensure those products remain a viable, sustainable option. One of those is obviously climate. We need to be demonstrating action on climate, and we need to be communicating better the incredible work that's happening behind us in the supply chain to bring forward things like carbon numbers, communicating our efforts towards our science-based targets, our support of initiatives like the Australian red meat industry's carbon neutral by 2030 target. The second to that is animal welfare. We need to be doing more to communicate the care that our animals are provided. And this is one area where we need to separate welfare from rights. We are investing a lot in the science of animal welfare to be able to communicate their animals are healthy and cared for throughout their life and provided a life worth living. That also is information and values that we're going to need to collaborate with our supply chain to be able to tell that positive story. And then there's the core business we do around quality and food safety that we've been doing for a while, these traditional market access challenges and the traditional way of valuing our meat products around quality and value. We need to continue to do and build on those systems to add in other sustainability initiatives, but also other communication initiatives. I don't want to take much more of your time, but to say initiatives like the Global Agenda are really important for companies like us that not only engage directly, but also through, as president of the Global Roundtable, Rory and I see value, and I'll speak for you briefly, Rory, in initiatives like GASL and allowing us to speak to places like UN Food Systems Summit, Climate COPs, Biodiversity COPs, places where, as the private sector, we're often struggled to have our voices heard. It's often difficult to be able to communicate the progress we're making and the efforts we're taking. So if I can promote any benefits to the GASL, to the private sector, it's being able to communicate and share with both, especially policymakers, the efforts that have been taken in the private sector to achieve the same outcomes that are stated as public policy and in commitments like the Sustainable Development Goals. I'll pause there and let you get on to the next speaker, but happy to stick around for question and answer.
Great, thanks a lot, Ian. So next, I'd like to invite Kirstine Hulse from Bremworth, the General Manager of Bremworth, so wool company, to talk about, well, either market drivers or the opportunities, as Ian suggested, in your business. Kirstine.
Sorry about that, slight technical difficulty there. Is that sharing all right? Can you see my presentation there?
Sharing, but it's not full screen. There we go. Yep, that'll be it.
Does that come up?
Not quite yet, but we can see it anyway, Kirstine. Why don't you just carry on?
Right, try it that way.
Yeah,
there we
it's
go.
big enough to see. Yeah,
fabulous. So delighted to be here this afternoon, just to also give you a little bit of a perspective from our side. So I look after sustainability for the organisation, and Bremworth has been on a considerable journey over the last couple of years. So just to give you a little bit of a feel for who we are and what we do. So we have been around for 60 years, or over 60 years. We're on the NZX or listed company, and 98% of our shareholders are domiciled in New Zealand. So really true to New Zealand. We produce 100% wool carpets and rugs. We have 3 different manufacturing sites, all based in New Zealand, Napier, Wanganui and in Auckland. So we're almost fully vertically integrated, except for our scour. We've got 410 employees across New Zealand and Australia, and 39% of our employees are women. So we definitely believe in that diversity and inclusivity, and we've been investing in that a lot in the last couple of years. So if I think about who we are, where we've come from, what we're trying to do, our vision is really to become a global leader in designing and creating desirable, sustainable, safe and high-performing natural interiors. At the moment, we are definitely focusing in that wool space. And I guess research tells us that there's a significant amount of the environmental impacts can be eliminated at the product design phase. And so that's something that we've been focusing on. And I think it's really, really important for organisations to actually think about how they can play a really important part in this. And so if you think about it, this is our purpose. It's to find a more sustainable way. And this really guides our decisions, and it relates to not just the environmental side, but the people side, the planet, as well as the profit. And the reason that we bring the profit part in there is because you need to have the profit to be able to invest back in the sustainability decisions and the sustainability research to really push yourself further. So that's why we see that you need all 3. Some of you will be aware of some of the changes that the business has gone through over the last couple of years, and just want to talk to you about what our thinking has been and what's been driving us here. So we see that plastic is a global problem, and we've seen that more and more consumers, and especially through this COVID period, have been waking up to the fact that plastic is not going to go away, that lots of carpet ends up in landfill, and that's really not a great environmental outcome. So through actually really looking at this and thinking, well, actually as a business, how do you make a difference in this? One of the things that we said, well, you know what, there's a natural alternative here. You don't have to go for synthetic carpets, you can go for wool carpets. And so we decided that as a business, one of the ways that we could really make a difference and contribute to this was to actually stop plastic at its source. And so we said goodbye to our synthetic carpet business a couple of years ago. And so here you are in July 2020, we pivoted to an all wool strategy. And part of this is appealing to that conscious consumer. Part of this is really finding our place in the world in terms of like really being a purpose-led organization and driving really hard towards that. But the other thing is that our customers and our consumers are really asking for more, and they're really asking for the sustainability side of things. And we get some really, really interesting questions and thought-provoking challenges from consumers as well, which is something that we wanted to be able to respond to. So if I look here at the market in New Zealand, this is just a market estimate by fibre, so in terms of synthetic and wool. And you can see there that there's an enormous opportunity to rebuild wool's share of the flooring market and grow our business at the same time, but actually giving people a healthy option for their home that is not plastic based. Because one of the things when we went out to the market and we said to people, do you know what your carpet's made out of? A lot of people didn't actually know what the carpet was made out of. And a lot of people had to sort of think and go, oh, actually, is it a synthetic or is it a wool? And 20 or 30 years ago, we know that everybody had wool carpets in their house, but now we know that that's actually very much changed and the swing has been towards synthetic and all of the consequences that go with that. So we're backing 100% New Zealand strong wool to be the optimum solution against a plastic carpet fibre or a synthetic carpet fibre, as the industry knows. We've been doing quite a lot of work with consumers to understand where they're at, understand their insights, understand where they see the benefits of wool and where they see the benefits of, you know, in their homes, and what the differences are between those perceptions between synthetics and wool, and why consumers would prefer one over the other. And what's actually driving some of that. So really leveraging that customer insight to really understand where consumers are going and seeing that really big change that's happening across consumers. And that's really been accelerated by COVID, by the lockdowns and people being in their homes. It's been a really interesting journey for us. So if I just put up a little bit of our own market research here, wool continues to be perceived more positively than synthetics, but synthetic carpets are definitely, they have a clear lead in terms of affordability and easy care in terms of that perception. So from our side, we see that there's still a job there to be done around bridging that knowledge gap between wool and these associations about, you know, what are the benefits of wool and what it means to be able to bring natural fibres into somebody's home, and those long-term health benefits as well as the environmental benefits. So where to start? The thing for us was that we started with disrupting ourselves. Instead of looking outwards, we looked inwards and said, what could we do? We've recognised that there's a lot of things that we want to do in this area, and we've invested in a team. So my team is sustainability. We didn't have a team 3 years ago. We do now. There's 10 of us in the team across a number of different investment or a number of different research programs. And we've got government funding that's helped us along the way on some of this, where we've co-funded with Ministry of Primary Industries, SFF Fund, and also through ECA, through their decarbonisation funds. And particularly the things that we're working on is finding natural and compostable solutions for our product so that we can ensure circularity. A big one there around reducing waste and using technology to help us in that space. And then there's a big part around energy efficiency and reducing our carbon footprint as a step that we can do before we look into our supply chains. So in many cases, some of the solutions we're looking for are not existing. So we've decided that we've invested in research. So we've got 3 PhDs that we sponsor, industrial PhDs with the University of Auckland. We also work with ag research around supporting these programs as well. And so we've recognised that we can't do this by ourselves, but we're working with some of the best minds in the industry to be able to help us solve some of the things that we want to solve from a sustainability perspective. So I guess just to wrap things up there, it's been a pretty big couple of years for us when we look back about what we've achieved and also what we wanted to achieve in the future. We've got some pretty big programs on to help us really challenge what we do from a sustainability perspective. We thought that the first place to start is definitely with ourselves, and where we could stop something at source and completely design something out, that's the happy place for us, where we went to as a starting point. But we also know that the markets are demanding it, the consumers are asking for it, and that's a real important consideration for organisations going forward. So happy to take any questions.
Great. Well, thanks very much for that, Kirstine. We've got 2 of you to combine for questions, and you were talking there about the consumers and what they demand, Kirstine, but I was wondering, I mean, we expect a lot of consumers, it seems, and well, a carpets, of course, is in your house for years, but for Ian's product, it might, as he said, be in your house for a couple of hours. Are we expecting too much of consumers? What sort of things are they asking you, Ian? And then we'll go back to Kirstine to see what they're asking you.
Yeah, certainly in terms of our impact at the consumer end, Rory, we focus on recyclable packaging and biodegradable packaging in that space and reducing the use of plastics so that the onus on consumer behaviour is lessened. That's because it's difficult, and a lot of their solutions are really based on public infrastructure around waste management, etc. So the more we can do to lessen that responsibility and passing it on to them, that's where our focus tends to be in that packaging space. Certainly, where they're acting is more, our consumer research suggests that they are beginning to make decisions around packaging, but actually more in terms of a willingness to pay is climate, and especially the now main breadwinners in families, the millennials, though they know the key issue around decarbonising the economy, and it consistently comes up high in our willingness to pay consumer research.
Right. Thanks, Ian. And Kirstine, you said that consumers are making demands. So in one way, you've already edited the choice for them because you're only offering a woolen carpet. What are they asking on top of that?
So they're definitely starting to ask questions about the circularity side of things, and they're starting to ask questions around the carbon side of things as well. So we're definitely seeing those millennials come through and ask more of those questions. So typically, though, millennials aren't necessarily the ones who are buying carpet from our side, but they might be the ones who are buying a rug. We see that that region of particularly women between 35 and 50, we see a growing awareness in that consumer category, who are asking just really good sound questions around sustainability and different aspects of it. So whether it applies to that end of life, whether it applies to the carbon side, whether it applies to the circularity side, whether it's about how do we deal with waste, they're definitely asking us many different questions, which is great. We love that coming through. And also, I guess, from the source side, from animal welfare, from where do you source your wool, that side of things as well, which is also important for us.
Yeah, that was one I was going to ask about. Do they ask you questions about how the wool itself is produced, or is that too far down the chain for them to be thinking about?
No, they do ask us those questions. And of course, all our wool is sourced in New Zealand. We have a certain amount of it, which is ZQ, so it has a certification, and then we are working towards the rest of it being 100% NZFAP. So that's what we're working with farmers at the moment. So we have a wool buying arm, and they do a lot of that work for us.
Great, thanks. And Ian, just one quick question before we have to move on, because we're pretty pressed for time. Do consumers ask anything else? You mentioned climate specifically. Does biodiversity or water quality or anything like that feature in what consumers are talking about yet, or is that not yet on the radar?
It tends to be part of a broader discussion. So what we've particularly asked in our research is, where does sustainability, regenerative agriculture, and those broader topics that cover a whole range of issues resonate? And they still resonate quite high. And those issues tend to be embedded more, as part of a broader sustainable offering, around regenerative agriculture, land use, reducing deforestation, etc. There are specific requests that come from shareholders, especially around forest policies and forest protection policies, reducing deforestation in our supply chains. But the consumer particularly, and it may be, in our case, evidence of scale. I mean, we're processing 45 million birds a week, 155,000 cattle a week. At that scale, we're dealing a lot of commodity product. There are certainly lines of products we're offering and others would be offering, and I see Jess Laughland on the call here today, who may share examples where people are asking specific questions because they're geographically tied to a product. They understand that they're buying a Tasmanian beef product and they're in Tasmania or Victoria, that they may be willing to ask more specifically about that. So it does vary, but at a commodity level, we're not seeing very specific questions around those topics yet.
Yeah. I will raise this because Michelle has put this in the chat, but it's interesting to see that people are keen on wool versus synthetic carpets, whereas we're seeing, and maybe it's coming from a different source, but we are seeing pressure elsewhere to switch away from leather towards, plastic alternatives. What's going on there? Do you know, Kirsten?
I think there's a huge part to play around consumer awareness around where the benefits are and how they stack up between each other, and to really present it from a science perspective. So that's all very credible, very, it stands by itself. It's not about producing a view that is biased towards one or the other. It's about actually being transparent about where the benefits really lie. So I guess that one probably goes into some far deeper philosophies and values, like whether or not somebody is vegan or not. So I think there's probably a few more things at play there.
Yeah, but as a pretty much a pure byproduct, you'd have thought leather was automatically a good choice, because if you don't use it, it's also going to end up in a landfill where you don't want it. Anyway, as you say, a good philosophical question to ponder on as we go about our daily lives. Thank you both very much for that. And sorry for being kind of hasty on the question side. Hopefully there'll be some in the chat that you might be able to answer just in writing. But I think we should move on now and invite Francesca Bennett from Dairy NZ, where she's an extension officer, but she's also a dairy producer. So it'd be good to hear from you, Francesca, about the adoption of a simple forage plant into a complex system.
Thank you. I was wondering, would Kirsten be able to stop sharing her screen so that I can take control?
I think the host has already taken control here from my side. If someone can help me.
Eduardo, are you in control of that? Can you?
Just a moment.
Okay.
It seems I am not. Can you do it, Kirsten? Kirsten?
Well, I've
in the share button.
I think you can now start sharing, Francesca, if you try that.
Yes, I can.
Right.
Perfect. Let's have a go.
Great.
Is that all right? Can you see that?
Yeah, we can. Excellent. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you very much. So hello, everyone, and thank you for having me. I'm Francesca Bennett, and I'm a dairy farmer here in New Zealand. I'm going to talk about the simple forage plant Plantain in a complex system. So we're in the Tararua district in the lower North Island of New Zealand. And as a catchment, we're pioneering a project trialling a forage plant on commercial dairy farms to help us meet our environmental obligations. In our catchment, there's predominantly 260 family-owned dairy farms, which have been hit with stringent environmental policy to improve freshwater quality. I personally share milk 260 cows here and have been on board the Dairy NZ Plantain project since 2018. As a young share milker, it's been really exciting to be part of this trial, and I've also been working as its extension to the project since July 2021. So the question is, why do we need Plantain? Well, in 2013, Horizons Regional Council introduced the One Plan. Existing and new dairy farms had to apply for consent. The One Plan had a specific focus on nitrate leaching. The One Plan pioneers a new approach to address nitrogen and ultimately freshwater quality in the catchment using farm-level nutrient management accounting, what many in New Zealand will know as overseer. Tararua is quite an exceptional catchment in that we have high annual rainfall and free draining soil types conducive to nitrate leaching issues. Tararua supplies over half of the Manawatu River with 320,000 hectares out of a total 600,000 hectares. Currently, as of 2017, when all consents came to a halt, 118 Tararua dairy farms are still operating without a land use consent. According to the initial One Plan numbers, those farms require on average a 60% N-loss reduction. For low-stocked grass-based systems, this is huge. We've limited levers left to pull. As a community, we're now demonstrating through the project and other initiatives, environmental commitment through action. So we classify farming systems in New Zealand from system 1 to 5. There's a range within the Tararua, but predominantly we fall under systems 2 to 3. To give some context, this would be a stocking rate of roughly 2.6 cows per hectare. National average is 2.9 cows per hectare. Tararua produces 997 milk solids per hectare, and the national average is 1,137. Nationally, cows in New Zealand produce 397 kilograms of milk solids annually. Tararua isn't far below the national figure with 380 milk solids per cow. The systems we run here have low inputs, are mostly self-contained, and would struggle to remain viable if forced to lower input and de-intensify any further. So my farm, I've been share milking for 6 years on my current farm, milking 260 crossbred cows over 108 hectares. We have a low stocking rate of 2.4 cows to the hectare, producing 440 kilograms of milk solids per cow annually, compared to the national average of 397. We fall under system 2, being fully self-contained with a small amount of imported feed, which is utilised on the shoulders of the season. We're strongly driven towards excellent pasture management and pasture first for profit. Being a young share milker and working hard to be able to build our own herd, investing everything we have in the farming business, we've endeavoured to future-proof our system and be as sustainable and resilient as possible whilst improving profitability. 90% of nitrates that reach waterways come from the urine patch of grazing animals. The single most thing we can do as an industry to reduce nitrate leaching is to focus on the urine patch. Plantain reduces nitrate leaching using 4 independent mechanisms. We won't go into depth with this today, but every 10% plantain in our farm system is recognised formally as a 2 to 3 kilogram reduction per hectare in our nitrate leaching. This is using the diuretic effect or dilution, as it says. Cows grazing plantain have a reduced urinary N concentration due to increased urine volume. The top picture is a great image of this effect in action. So what are our options? The 3 significant options we have currently for reducing environmental impact are investment in large off-paddock infrastructure, a pasture-based solution in plantain, or ultimately destock the farm. Infrastructure can capture nutrients to be stored and used efficiently. However, there is large investment cost and long-winded process associated with this, and subsequently a total change in farming system. The agronomic solution in Plantain, which fits naturally in a grass-based system to provide increased summer resilience and proven environmental attributes, and destock, reduce intensity and subsequently reduce profit. The remaining question here is, how will the system continue to be viable? So monitoring across the Tararua has shown incorporating plantain within mixed pastures and with pure plantain crops will not result in a reduction in forage supply, and in some cases an increase in yield is likely to happen. As you can see from the graphs, gains are mostly made in summer and autumn. So what does plantain offer us? In addition to being a highly effective nitrogen leaching mitigation technology, plantain is an excellent forage which improves the seasonal feed profile by increasing summer activity and drought tolerance. It's the natural addition to a diverse pasture mix, along with having animal health benefits across virtually all high-performing pasture-based systems. Pasture quality data from the project has shown that farmers should have confidence using plantain. It will not result in a substantive loss in forage quality or a reduction in forage supply. We would, however, like to better understand the perenniality of plantain. One main question remains in my mind: under what conditions do we see plantain lasting the longest? This is certainly a common question amongst farmers. Whilst we know plantain is closer in life cycle to that of a hybrid grass, it's still unclear why it lasts on some farms in certain paddocks, and this is something that we will continue to study in the project. So how has plantain reduced RN leaching on my farm? So we've got 6 hectares of paddocks across the farm, which are pure plantain clover stands. We've also got significant plantain population within our mixed pastures of ryegrass, plantain, and clover. Plantain is scored at a level of 10% in our whole farm system, which reduces our N leaching to 26 kilograms per hectare. This is well below the 2036 target of 33 units of N leach per hectare. Thanks to plantain, we're operating well within the constraints of our land use consent, and we've got good headroom, which provides us with some security for the future, and we know we're not operating at the detriment to the environment. So what do I see as the future pathway for plantain? We've only just scratched the surface. Currently, only the diuretic or dilution effect of plantain is recognised for N leaching reductions. There is significant research underway to further demonstrate the scientific attributes of plantain within the soil, not just the animal. The next challenge for us as an industry will be greenhouse gas emissions. Plantain has demonstrated potential reductions in nitrous oxide emissions, one of the main gases we will be working to reduce as an industry. Further work is now being done to quantify this. Climate change is also a practical threat to farming. As modelling suggests, we're going to see prolonged dry periods with above average temperatures. When ryegrass falters in the heat, plantain excels. The optimal temperature for plantain is 25 degrees. Sward recovery for pastures containing plantain is much greater after dry periods. There may well be a much more practical need for plantain. One outcome I have from using plantain: resilience and sustainability is assured within my farming system. We're certainly going some way to being future-proof whilst taking action towards our environmental commitments. Thanks so much for listening. I will now stop sharing my screen.
Brilliant. Well, thanks very much for that. We'll do the questions again after both of you have spoken. So I'll invite who we got from Melanie Leather, which is in Australia, beef producing company. Apologize, I don't have your name in front of me.
Okay, Melanie.
Okay, sorry.
Good to go. Thank you.
Yeah, on you go. Thanks for that.
Yeah, great. Thanks. Very pleased to be here today and give a beef cattle producer's perspective. I don't think there's ever been a more exciting time for the beef industry. Along with some challenges, we've got a lot of opportunities ahead of us. So let's get started. Okay, Leather Cattle Co. It's a family-run operation, including my husband Rob and I, in partnership with our son Adam and his wife Chloe. We have 3 properties covering an area of 17,500 hectares where we breed and finish cattle for the organic, EU and natural pasture-fed markets. We're currently running around 5,000 head of cattle, and our family is committed to working towards a sustainable future for our business, our environment and our animals. We're also dedicated to the health, safety and well-being of our family and staff. Continuous education and personal growth opportunities are also a priority for us, as is service and involvement in our local community. Sustainable beef production isn't just about securing a future for our family, though. It's about the contribution we can make to global food security and climate action. We feel a real responsibility to ensure we remain sustainable for future generations. And we are very conscious about our customers, consumers, and community expectations around sustainable food production and environmental management. This slide shows where our 3 properties are situated in the catchment of the Great Barrier Reef, one of our 7 wonders of the world, and an area that we must help to protect with good land management. Across our properties, we have 30 different regional ecosystems and 14 different land types. Managing these variations, along with the challenges of extreme weather events and natural disasters, requires a very tailored approach. There is no one size fits all. This slide here really captures this year's global agenda for sustainable livestock theme action towards more sustainable food systems. And why does it capture it, you might ask? And it is because of the people. I believe for us to build a sustainable, inclusive and resilient livestock system, we must first start with the people. By empowering producers, we can improve biodiversity and build resilience in our food and farming systems and create stronger communities. In 2019, a group of 16 beef and grain producing families in my community come together to form the Barfield Road Producer Group. Collectively, we manage over 50,000 hectares in the Fitzroy Basin and Burnett Merry Regional Natural Resource catchment areas. Our group recognised a need to build extension and adoption networks that increase local knowledge in sustainable beef production, including evolving ecosystem service markets like carbon and natural capital. We also recognised that a peer-to-peer learning structure provided a foundation that was practical for producers who were keen to participate in new opportunities, but overwhelmed with information. The vision of our producer group is to be an innovative producer group that is better prepared and informed by increasing awareness, education, and engagement with a focus on sustainability. And our mission to achieve this by developing effective partnerships that will assist us to enhance, strengthen, and protect our businesses. The group strategically aligns with the Australian Beef Sustainability Framework to ensure that we're not only meeting industry and community expectations, but are leading the way to a more sustainable beef production. I can't emphasize enough the importance of these effective partnerships. Our group make the most of every opportunity to participate in projects, producer demonstration sites, pilots, and ongoing education and training. These not only afford us the skills and resources to make practice change for improved management, but they also identify gaps and areas where we can improve. It gives our businesses the chance to trial ideas that we may not have had the funds or confidence to try otherwise. And it gives us a platform to share information and lessons learned. Not only must we surround ourselves with the right people, but we must also be willing to trial and uptake new technology as it becomes available. By collaborating with a range of private, government, and tertiary organisations, we can get the tools and technology to collect valuable data and make informed decisions for improved management. We also find the Department of Agriculture and our natural resource management groups invaluable. They are our connection to the health of the Great Barrier Reef, training us in land management, biodiversity, and soil health. DAF, in addition to land management, also covers livestock management, assisting us with animal health welfare, nutrition, and genetics. All very important when we are analysing our herd health, but also our herd inventory and emissions impact. And equally important, improved management in these areas will ensure the long-term profitability and productivity of our businesses. Profitable businesses and safe and happy work environments are essential to the sustainability of beef production, as is connecting with fellow producers and the broader community. Collectively, this all leads to prosperous and resilient regional communities. As I said earlier, we work on several projects to bring about land practice change. One such project has been the Natural Resource Investment Program, funded by the Queensland Government and delivered to us by the Fitzroy Basin Association. Essentially, the aim of the project is to increase native woody vegetation on grazing land and ultimately, in the long term, demonstrate that increasing vegetation on property has positive effects for grazing productivity. We did this on our property by planting a 15-hectare tree corridor, linking some remnant vegetation on Barfield. Due to our climatic conditions in central Queensland, this was definitely going to be a challenge, and our first attempt had less than a 50% success rate. We are now heading to more successful plantings, but none of this would have happened without working with our local catchment group to pull together the botanists, the scientists, technology and funding to have a go at what we had identified as being too risky for our business to invest in. We now have the confidence and skills to undertake further plantings, and once again, with the help of good scientists from DAF, have mapped future corridors. This leads me to how collaboration can be so powerful. By building on this initial step towards tree planting with another fantastic project called Method to Market, unlocking ecosystem service opportunities for livestock producers. We could start to see where different organisations and projects complemented each other and increased opportunities at achieving successful practice change. These projects have branched out to completing biocondition assessments with the Queensland Herbarium, producing verifiable data on the flora and fauna at Barfield. Over 10 sites, they recorded 128 flora species and 90 fauna species. We now have the scientific data to confidently plan tree planting corridors, connecting vegetation across the property, and know that we will make positive impacts on our flora and fauna. The value of these projects to improve management practices across all aspects of our businesses, including our people, animals, and environment, is enormous. And when we consolidate the scale of participants, greater gains in efficiency and opportunity for societal change is being reached. This is just one example of the strength and power in networks. For the Barfield Road Producer Group and all the producers who work with us, the connections continue. The networks grow, the strength of collaboration builds, and ultimately industry and community benefit. So yes, we are making a difference, but how do we know that? And how do we ensure we can communicate that difference in a transparent and credible way? We do that by monitoring, measuring, and reporting. The collection and analysis of data using the latest tools and technology available is critical for us to not only prove our progress, but also identify the gaps. Together, we are taking the transformative steps to stimulate action for a more sustainable food system. In closing, I just want to touch on our integration with the Sustainable Development Goals that I have listed on this slide. We have shown by having a collaborative relationship with all the different stakeholders we engage with, increases the success of our actions. And I think when we look at achieving 11 out of the 17 Sustainable Development Goals, we are on a path to success. By combining skills, sharing resources and risks, we increase the possibilities for a more sustainable future. Thank you. I'll stop sharing.
Melanie, that was a lot of information, very concisely presented. So thanks a lot for fitting so much in. I was wondering, you talked about the corridors that you've planted already and the ones that you're planning to plant in the future. I mean, I can see that that's going to provide a benefit to biodiversity. How does your own company and your family benefit from that?
I think there's a lot of ways that we can benefit. So yes, definitely we're thinking about the biodiversity, but we're also thinking about the health and welfare of our animals. So we're definitely getting increased temperatures here in central Queensland. So, you know, we're looking ahead and going, well, how are we going to start to mitigate that risk? And we need more shade. And I think that's going to be a great way to do it. And, you know, yeah, there's no downside to planting trees from what we can see. It's all benefits to us.
Right, exactly. Thanks very much. And Francesca, the plantain one, I know it's a completely different production environment, but it sounds like something that the Dutch needed to learn a while ago before they went all out for investing in infrastructure and keeping cattle off grass, because they're now faced with these nitrogen caps. Is it something that's going to be looked at more widely across New Zealand?
Absolutely. So there's a national plantain potency and practice program, bit of a tongue twister, at Dairy NZ, which is partnering with farmers throughout New Zealand to help meet the catchment needs, because certainly this isn't a Tararua specific sort of problem. It's absolutely nationwide. And I think the project has actually received attention from further afield, the likes of Ireland, I know, and Tasmania as well took some interest. So it will be really, really interesting to see, you know, how far this does go. What I didn't talk about, also touching on the Dutch farmers, is that plantain is a really, really good image. You know, it's really good for that public perception piece. If we can get that image and message across to the general public, you know, if I'm using plantain, I'm what you might like to call an environmentally friendly farmer. Yeah.
Well, if the massive rainfall we've had here in Nelson is anything to go by, we'll be seeing lots more leaching of every kind in the coming years. We got 40% of our annual rainfall in 4 days last week. Melanie, I've got a question for you. You've got really good access to research and extension, obviously working with Fitzroy Basin and Queensland Government, and I guess AgForce as well. Is that typical of farmers throughout the region and producers throughout the region, or have you just been lucky, or have you worked really hard to make those connections?
Look, our family business definitely has identified absolute value in collaborating with all of the different people that are available to us. But in the Fitzroy Basin and even the Burnett Mary, where we've got properties as well, I think maybe because they're reef catchments, but producer engagement is fairly good. So people really want to do a good job. And these catchments, you know, like I said, they can give us the tools and technology, on-ground assistance that we're requiring to make good decisions around land management, making sure that we're reducing our runoff onto the reef, making sure that we've got really good ground cover, and the technology to be able to measure that remotely. I mean, there's just some fantastic tools out there, and that connection allows us to do that.
Excellent. Well, thank you both very much. We'll keep it short again, I'm afraid, just because we've got this limited time. So thank you both, Francesca and Melanie. They're both really practical stories, which is always great to hear. And now I'll hand over to Jacob from MLA and from the Australian Beef Sustainability Framework to lead the coming sessions. Thanks, Jacob.
Thanks very much, Rory, and thank you to the presenters so far. Short, powerful speeches, and we have a few more to go. So thank you very much to everyone for staying on, and we'll continue to make sure that everything is interesting and you have opportunities to ask questions. So please do put them in the chat as well if you would like to. As Rory's been doing, I'll move on quickly as well. So I'd like to introduce our next speaker, Margaret Jewell. So Margaret is MLA's carbon neutral 2030 manager, and has driven the assembly of the portfolio of CN30 investments. These research, development and adoption projects aim to scale the implementation of on-farm technologies and practices that will enable Australia's red meat industry to achieve the CN30 target. So thank you very much, Margaret. I'll now pass over to you.
Thanks, Jacob, and hi, everyone. I'll just share screens. It's been really interesting listening to the other speakers today. I do have way too many slides, so I'll be trying to talk fast, but please feel free to cut me off if you need to. Yeah, I'm Margaret, and as Jacob said, I'm from Meat and Livestock Australia, and I'll be covering the Australian red meat industry's carbon neutral by 2030 initiative, or CN30. there's just a quick agenda for the day. So we'll kick off with some drivers and progress, and I guess opportunities or drivers for CN30 really stem around market access and maintaining or growing consumer and community support, and making sure that we can continue to be a resilient and high industry that produces a high quality protein source into the future. We have an overarching strategy that's developed by the Red Meat Advisory Council in Australia, with a vision to double the value of Australian red meat sales by 2030 as a trusted source of the highest quality protein. And achieving carbon neutrality is being called out as a key success indicator of that overarching vision. So CN30 is a target for the Australian red meat industry to achieve net zero greenhouse gas emissions by 2030. We are working really closely with state and federal government departments, research organisations, universities, private enterprise, and of course our producer and processor stakeholders in the industry. Really importantly, CN30 is an industry target, so we aren't requiring that every individual red meat enterprise in Australia is carbon neutral. Rather, we are custodians of a huge area of land in Australia as red meat producers, and I'll talk a bit more about that shortly. But we do have an opportunity to store a lot of carbon in the landscape that our producers are custodians over, that we'll be able to use to offset or inset the emissions that are associated with the industry. So each year we do an annual emissions update that's led by the CSIRO in Australia, and they crunch the numbers. There is a data lag, so the latest data, the year that we have data for is 2019. And we do a comparison between every year and 2005. And so between 2005 and 2019, we've reduced our emissions by almost 60%. And that's largely due to changes in vegetation management in Australia, which have resulted in reduced clearing and increased area of woody regrowth. And the next big problems that we have to tackle are really on the other side of the carbon equation. So looking more at how can we reduce the emissions that are associated with our livestock enterprises. So what are the opportunities for red meat producers in Australia? We're finding that identifying these opportunities for red meat producers is really important, and we've got a big task ahead of us in awareness raising so that we can help red meat producers understand what the opportunities are and how they can access them. But as I said, red meat production is a major land use in Australia. So over about 50% of the land mass is where red meat is produced, and that's about 355 million hectares. And importantly, most of that land isn't suitable for the production of anything else other than the conversion of pastures into high quality protein by ruminant animals. So part of this big awareness raising piece with our producers, we're trying to just get them to understand how fundamental carbon is in the production of livestock. So we talk a lot about nitrogen and water use efficiency and other things, but we don't really talk about carbon use efficiency. And now that carbon is becoming monetized and there's opportunities around it, it's important that we understand how if we increase efficiencies in carbon, it's good for our businesses' bottom lines. So essentially, if we can maximize the amount of carbon that we're sequestering through photosynthesis into pastures and then either into soil carbon or tree carbon, or importantly into animal live weight, rather than losing carbon from the system mostly as methane, then it's a really good way to build efficiencies in our business regardless of carbon. But now that carbon's monetized, there's sort of a win-win situation. So by having a more efficient system in terms of carbon and minimizing the carbon that's lost as methane, we have better businesses, and then there might be opportunities to monetize the carbon that we're able to demonstrate that we've saved as well. So we're telling our producers to just start with a business plan. We don't want producers to be implementing any new practices that are going to be adverse to their normal plans for their businesses' prosperity and longevity. And then we're asking them to understand how, when they think of new practices that they want to introduce for their business, if they look at that through a carbon lens and understand how their carbon dynamics have changed through implementing that practice, then they will have a good understanding of how to demonstrate that and what opportunities they might be able to access. And we've got in Australia, and I think this is probably similar at a global level as well, two sort of broad categories of carbon opportunities. So firstly, there's an opportunity to do a carbon project, generate carbon credits and sell them either through the Australian carbon market or international markets. But this other opportunity is to demonstrate a low or carbon neutral position. So the low or carbon neutral position can apply at multiple different boundaries. And for most red meat producers and stakeholders, they'll seek to obtain a carbon neutral or low carbon farm or business, or participate in a carbon neutral or low carbon supply chain or branded product. So we've got some carbon neutral farms in Australia that are very well known, and they haven't gone out and got a certification. They've just demonstrated that they can prove their position by having the data, and they've done their own marketing around that. When it comes to branded products though, we're pretty sure that consumers are going to need that little certification stamp to trust that the item that they're purchasing is what it says it is. And then the main difference between demonstrating a low or a carbon neutral position and trading credits is that instead of selling off any credits that have been generated through your practices, you would hold on to those credits to use them as offsets or insets against the residual emissions from your production system. And here's a few early movers. We've got 4 carbon neutral red meat brands in Australia that have achieved that status by doing their carbon accounting and then purchasing offsets. And then we've seen a couple of other carbon neutral and low carbon brands pop up overseas as well. And one in particular from New Zealand has been able to demonstrate a carbon neutrality by not relying on purchased offsets, but by storing carbon within the production system. Okay, so I'll just quickly run through the R&D that we're conducting at MLA. We've got a CN30 roadmap, and the R&D that we're doing fits into these 4 key work areas that I'll go through individually. So the leadership building work area is really the adoption and the awareness raising piece. As I said, we're out talking to producers a lot, and as part of that, we're continuing to improve the resources and training materials that are available to them to understand their carbon flows through their system and to conduct that measuring so that they can demonstrate where they're at. Our major focus to date has really been on the emissions avoidance work area. So we've got 2 anti-methanogenic feed additives that there's a lot of focus on. They're called 3-nop or bovia and the red asparagopsis seaweed. We're continuing to conduct R&D on them to get them commercialised and available. And really importantly, we're working hard to develop delivery mechanisms to get those additives into grazing systems, which is the real source of emissions for us in Australia. It's easy to get these things into feedlots by putting them in a ration, but feedlots make up about 4% of the emissions that are related with our industry. We're also working hard on genetics, doing some work that will include methane or EBVs and ASBVs for methane traits in genetic selection indices. And of course, continuing to work on improving the pasture quality by adding legumes and multi-species pastures. In the carbon storage side of things, we've got a big focus on reducing the costs associated with soil carbon measurement. It can be quite expensive for producers in Australia to do their soil carbon baselining, and that's prohibiting people from getting involved in soil carbon projects. And we are also working in Australia on building up a data set of what types of practices do actually result in increased soil carbon. So we're looking at regenerative practices as well as fertilising, the use of legumes and transitioning from cropping to permanent pastures. And we're also doing a lot of work with trees. So we want to better enable our producers to make decisions about the types of trees to plant and where and how many to plant, so that they'll have a carbon benefit, but also improved production and productivity through providing shade and shelter. And then this is the last work area and pretty much the last slide. So our integrated management systems work area is really involves us working with the federal government so that we can make sure they've got the right data to inform their development of methodologies that will enable accounting for and benefiting from reducing emissions through the use of supplements and legumes. And we're also we're at the sort of second half of a project that will build a platform that will enable red meat producers to have a sort of a first point of being able to demonstrate a verified environmental credential for a range of themes, and they include carbon biodiversity, tree cover, ground cover, and drought resilience. So thank you. That's it from me, and I look forward to questions.
Thank you very much, Margaret. Just a reminder, if anyone does have questions, please enter them into the chat or just raise your virtual hand if you wish. So we do have a bit of time for questions for Margaret, because we do know that carbon neutrality is quite a hot topic and gets a lot of interest. So while we wait for some other people, Margaret, I will ask you, how have you seen the acceptance of carbon and carbon farming coming from, the producer side of things? Is it growing in acceptance? Is it growing in interest, or is there still that bit of a hesitation around that?
When I compare what the sentiment seems to be like now with when I first started in this role in November 2019, pre-COVID, there's been a huge change in, I guess, not so much awareness, but acceptance. So I really think that producers in Australia can see that this change is coming. They can see that there's carbon neutral products out there, and there's a lot of talk about carbon. So they can see that if they're not going to maybe get involved, then they're going to miss out on something, which is important. But there's still a lot of work to do to ease confusion that's sort of, I think caused, largely from carbon project developers and aggregators being the main source of advice for many producers in Australia. So they're getting their information from people that stand to make some money out of doing work with producers.
So what would your main piece of advice be for those people who get approached by carbon aggregators?
Oh, well, look, I think that of course, do a business plan first and understand how the project that you're planning to jump into might impact across all areas of your business. And definitely have a trusted advisor or even a lawyer look over any contracts before signing up to things. There's risks and benefits, and this is probably a really good opportunity for some producers, but most definitely not all.
Excellent. And in lieu of anyone else asking questions, I'll keep hogging the limelight. How are you seeing external stakeholders and external customers looking at the CN30 initiatives that MLA are driving?
Could you give me an example of what type of external stakeholders?
Are you seeing finance organizations or banks coming in really quite interested to see what's happening in this space, and what type of questions are they asking?
Yeah, I do. And I think that we're kind of in a spot where everyone's trying to catch up to each other. So it's a really fast moving area, and there's no kind of really solid industry framework that the banks can all jump on and sort of use that as their evidence that they're asking for how producers are performing. So we might be at risk of having, each bank will have its own set of criteria for what needs to be provided, and it's probably preferred that there's some kind of a centralized way of doing that. We've certainly got interest from banks in helping with that piece, so setting up frameworks for how their clients can demonstrate how they're performing. But we've also had a lot of talk about people wanting to invest in the development of these supplements, because at the end of the day, we do have a lot of hope in these supplements starting to be really widely used by mid-decade for us to be successful with CN30.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. And I can't see any other questions. So thank you very much, Margaret, for your time. And it doesn't hurt that we're 5 minutes ahead of schedule. So I'd like to introduce Kari Moffat now. So Kari is the Animal Welfare Assurance Manager at Austrex, overseeing the exporter supply chain assurance systems and animal welfare in the live export supply chain. Kari has 8 years experience in the live export industry, is a co-founder and current chair of the Young Livestock Exporters Network and an executive of the Queensland Livestock Exporters Association. So thank you, Kari.
Thank you, Jacob. I'll just share my screen. Okay, can we see my slides?
Yes, thank you.
Perfect, thanks. Thanks for that introduction, and thank you so much for the opportunity to talk today. So my discussion today will be around ag's aging workforce and how what industry using live export industry as a case study is doing to retain young people working in the supply chain, and how that links to a sustainable industry. So I guess pre-2019, as a young person coming into the industry, I was in my early 20s, and like a number of young people in the industry, if you show some initiative, you can be promoted into a junior management role quite quickly. And that can be a bit of a sink or swim situation to be put into. So we were looking as young people in the industry also, at the time there was, there always is, but commercial barriers which prevented us from talking to other young people working in the supply chain, and also this, I guess, mentality of the industry was mainly older generation, and there wasn't that many young people to begin with. So those professional development opportunities just weren't available. And when we went seeking them as individuals, they were either not really tailored to what we were looking for as young people in ag, or it was the fact that we didn't have an organisational structure to access funding to be able to run such courses. So after being pushed back a few times, some colleagues and I decided to set up a structure that would allow us to access funds to run professional development opportunities for young people working in the live export industry here in Australia. And at the time, there was 3 of us on what we founded as the Young Live Exporters Network Committee. And we thought we'd be running 1 or 2 opportunities a year for 10 to 20 people, and we'd run a networking opportunity alongside that for those individuals. And out of that, we had a really clear objective. So we wanted to run those professional development opportunities, not just for live export staff, but anyone working in the supply chain, so that we could be networking with people working along that supply chain, and also learning about the different opportunities that are in the live export industry, and building those relationships to further our careers. So that was established in 2019. And I guess at the time we had no idea that in our first year we would have the interest that we did. And we went very quickly to over 100 paid members, which was a huge, I guess, a driver for us as a committee, that what we were trying to do, there was real interest for, particularly in Northern Australia, where being remote or on a live export vessel, that you might not have had access to those opportunities before. So I guess what did we do differently? We were all young people on the committee. So what we were trying to drive was opportunities for young people run by young people. And through that, we were able to provide opportunities that were really specific to people working in the industry at the time, and also to right across the supply chain, not just direct live export staff. And by doing that, fast forward to current, we have over 250 members Australia-wide and a few actually internationally. So in the very short space of a couple of years, it was very clear that there was that gap in the industry for professional development for young people, and that key driver of capacity building really needs to start at that junior level, because going forward, they're going to be the next leaders of the industry. What has WILEN achieved? So through what we've run, so that could be managerial skills, so those soft skills that we need when you step up from maybe an officer role into a management role where you've got staff, those kind of skills, to livestock handling, negotiation training, also working in an international space. We were able to provide cultural awareness training, Indonesia being our biggest live export market. That was something we ran last year. So really tailored to the young people working in our supply chains. And last year we ran 55 positions for members. The networks that we've been able to provide, so giving people access to not just the people working in their direct role, but right across that supply chain, from producers, quarantine staff, truck drivers, veterinary officers, department staff, and live export companies as well. But not only for young people, because what we see, I think, is opportunities that is a room full of young people. What we've gone the extra mile in trying to achieve is actually bringing current leaders into a room with future leaders, so that there's that network opportunity for them to be learning from current leaders in the industry. And that was something we ran up in Darwin earlier in the year, which had over 250 participants attend, which was a fantastic result. And the outcomes of that is obviously building those relationships for the next generation coming in. And the platform that WILEN now has is, over the last few years, it's got a lot more recognition, which I guess when we started, we never, that wasn't what we were seeking, but has been a result of the interest that it's brought and the level of members that we've been able to recruit over a short period of time, which has given us this amazing platform to promote opportunities in agriculture more broadly, and also those niche opportunities that don't get any limelight. So that, you know, there's way more jobs than just being on farm, and your career in ag or live export more specifically doesn't mean necessarily what you think it means, particularly for those people coming from outside of an ag background. I guess the key learnings that we have found through building the Young Live Exporters Network over the past few years is stick to your mission, and don't deviate from that. And I think that's been a real key to the success over the last 3 years. Is we were really clear, and we want to help young people take the next step in their career, and through capacity building of those individuals and building their networks is how that's going to be achieved. And I think that through that really clear mission, that's how we've been able to, I guess, access the funding that we have, and also the success of the committee, that those people have a really clear understanding of what the network is trying to achieve. Going forward, it's going to be really interesting to see how it progresses, and the next generation, I guess, coming through is going to be able to achieve, because the growth has been so rapid. But I think that's something that's really exciting. And being such a new organisation, the opportunities to grow are still there. So it's I think it's a fantastic case study of what can be built when there's real passion for the industry that you work in, and also when people come together, and the importance of collaboration. Thank you, Jacob.
Thanks very much for that, Kari. And if there's one thing I've taken from your presentations, is that people love branded hats by the looks of it. Seems to be going pretty well. So again, for anyone who wishes to ask a few questions, please do raise your virtual hand. But from me, Kari, when you established YLEN, what were some of your learnings, and I guess what were some things that you found that didn't work?
Yeah, so I think for the first committee, we all had the same objectives, and our personal success rode on the success of the organisation, and we were really clear on what we were trying to achieve. And I think that will be one of the learnings, I guess, going forward, on the challenge of how do you link personal success to the success of an organisation when you're not the founder of what the organisation was established for in the first place. And watching other youth organisations, a personal development opportunity is obviously to get onto a committee, but that doesn't necessarily link to what that committee is trying to achieve as an organisation. So it's been as a committee, it's been a learning of how do you continue to link those two things together, because I think that's where you get that real, I guess, hum of a committee being successful, because you're able to link those two successes together. One of the other learnings that we had was you can't just assume that maybe more prominent young people in the industry want to be involved. We were trying to establish state chapters to get that more Australia-wide reach, which we tried and it didn't work. It's definitely got to be individuals seeking those opportunities to want to help. You can't just push that onto people and assume that they're going to take that responsibility, particularly when you've got a whole volunteer committee.
So what do you see, I'll get to you, Melanie, one second. Just what do you see as the next step for YLEN?
That's a really good question. I think, the growth has been very rapid, and I think there's got to be a bit of a stock take on that's probably not sustainable growth, and maturing of the organisation would mean that I think you've got to probably scale back and ensure that if you continue to grow, you can still maintain that membership base, and you're able to provide opportunities to those young people that are signing up, because otherwise you'll lose them after 12 months. And it's a paid membership, so they're not they are investing in the committee to be able to deliver those outcomes. And I think the size of the network we have now is probably at its limits, unless you were able to access that next level of funding. So that's kind of where it's at now.
Excellent. I guess that tells to you stick to your mission comment earlier.
Yes.
Melanie, I'll throw to you, Melanie.
Yeah, thanks. Oh, excellent presentation. What an exciting group, Kari. Just wanting to know, how do you keep momentum going? I know within our producer group, some of our younger members, if they're starting young families, things like that, life gets busy, hard to keep them engaged and that momentum building. Is there something that you do to handle that, or is it's just something that, falls away as well?
Yeah, definitely. We've got an age limit on our network of 40. So yes, that does include a lot of people with young families. I think at a committee level, in the last 12 months, we realised that we needed to provide an opportunity for those committee members that are volunteering those hours to run the organisation. That's something extra that a normal member doesn't get, as a bit of an incentive and also a thank you of investing that time. And this year we're running governance training for all of the committee, which is a bit of, obviously it's a bit of incentive for them to have wanted to participate in the first place, and also incentivizes that next group coming through. And as an individual, on an individual basis, it's also, I think, important because that committee is going to become, as individuals, going to become industry leaders. And they're, what we've seen from committee members over the last few years, quite a few of them are already now on industry level committees. And I think there's that expectation that they do have governance understanding. So being able to provide that is, it's part of our pillars of providing professional development. So making sure that the graduates of our committee are well positioned to take on those leadership roles when they're presented.
Excellent. Thanks for that, Melanie and Kari. Olivia, you have your virtual hand raised.
Thanks, Jacob. Thanks, Kari. It was so great to hear all that. I wasn't familiar with your story so well, so thank you. It's a great success story. I'm just wondering if anyone has approached you at all about how a similar youth livestock producer group potentially could be set up nationally to cover other sectors other than live export, because I just see there's a huge opportunity there. And I just, wondered whether anyone has actually discussed that with you and how that could look. Ag education's obviously on everyone's radar at the moment, as is capacity building, and it's just so hugely important. And the work that you guys are doing is just fantastic.
Yeah, it's an interesting question, and it was one that was raised. So a lot of what we do is in Northern Australia purely. A lot of our committee are based up there, but also there was that real gap in those more remote areas for those opportunities compared to on the East Coast and Southern Australia. And if we just look at Northern Australia in general, yes, there'd been conversations of how we could set one up for, the cattle industry. And I guess my counter was, well, I think over 60% of our membership are actually producers. So we were already filling that void for the Northern cattle industry without having to duplicate it. And as an organisation, we were happy to be able to provide more tailored opportunities to on-farm rather than having to take them away or them having to make the choice. And we're real, like, even though the name has exporter in it, it's not necessarily representative of the membership, and we're very much about that supply chain focus and the learnings that come from that of being able to network across the supply chain. So I guess that's where we've come at it from. But I know other sectors such as pork have been talking about how do they set it up for their industry, because it has been so successful. And there's the national Future Farmers Network that run similar opportunities as well down south. So there are other groups out there. I think Wyland punches above its weight, I think, a little bit in terms of our sector's quite small, but we do as a network we've got a quite large representation. So I think it's just highlights what can be achieved when you've got a really passionate committee.
Brilliant, thank you.
Thanks for the question, Olivia, and thank you so much for your time, Kari. I'll now pass over to Liz to introduce our final presenter for the day. Thank you, Liz.
Kia ora katoa, Liz Wedderburn here, and Kari, thank you for that presentation. When the Global Agenda has its multi-stakeholder platform meeting in, I was going to say Dunedin, Dublin, it's going to have a youth faction there, and the Global Agenda really needs to hear the voice of youth. So thank you so much for that. It's my pleasure now to introduce Rika Mato. Kia ora, Rika, ngā mihi nui. I'm going to hand it over to you. Rika is a farmer on the east coast of New Zealand here, and he's going to talk to us a little bit about his work with his community. Kia ora, Rika.
Kia ora, Liz. Ka tira tēnā tātou katoa. He mihi nunui tēnei kia koutou. Me ngā kaupapa e takoto nei koutou I mua I tō mate waroro I tēnei rā. Nā reira tēnā koutou. Just a big greetings to everyone on here today. And wonderful to hear all the discussion and presentations that's going to influence the future of agriculture, not only in New Zealand, but throughout the world as we're moving on to Dublin. Kia ora tātou. Sorry, I've been running around like a headless chicken today. As I'm a dairy farmer, we're in the middle of calving, and the weather hasn't been very particularly nice to us this season. So I'm just going to give a verbal presentation, and hopefully I've got time to fix up my slideshow later on. A bit about myself. Ko tihiro te maunga, ko whangaprawa te awa, ko te whānau kawaitangu here te hapu, ko te whānau apanui te iwi. So as Liz has previously mentioned, I'm based up here in the Eastern Bay of Plenty on the East Cape of the North Island. Actually, I'm running a family farm, milking 180 cows. It's an intergenerational farm, so I'm the fourth generation of my family to be on the land. And it's a treasure that I hope to then pass on to my kids, as it has been done before me. So we were fortunate enough to be involved in a East Coast dairy cluster, comprising of 5 Māori farms, 4 of them being Māori trusts, and 1 being an owner-operator. The farms are all based here in the Eastern Bay of Plenty, from Oporiki to Cape Runaway. And that's a huge stretch of coastline that runs about 130 k's. So within that, there's a huge variation in farming systems, farm management and farm governance. So this cluster was set up to bring around change in terms of governance, profitability, sustainability, the environment, and the social impact. This cluster was brought about by MPI and Dairy NZ, and we're very grateful for their support and their continued support with our cluster. And not only that, but through the mahi that they provide in assisting Māori farms in our area. The aim of the cluster was to work together to grow the capability and confidence to make sound decisions covering farm production, financial performance, biodiversity, environmental plans, animal welfare plans, and on-farm policies and strategies. So just a quick introduction into whenua Māori. So we're talking about Māori land here, and whenua Māori is a taonga tukuiho, or a intergenerational gift. It's not something that we go out and we buy. It's as I've mentioned before, it's a treasure that's passed down through generations to generation. So Māori are connected to their land via their whakapapa, and it's through their genealogy that they are able to be gifted land. And so for us as Māori, it's our whenua or our land is seen as a taonga, a special gift. And just want to share a story with you all that my father is the youngest of 12 siblings. His father asked all his children if they would like to take the farm on, and one by one they all declined the offer. And my father, being the baby, they left him no option but to say yes. And so at the age of 21, my father came home and ran the family farm. And today I'm doing that with my family, and hoping that I can leave the farm to my kids in a better state than what I received it in. But very grateful for the gift that my ancestors have given me here. Cool. So we'll just touch on the governance. If we think about governance as the engine room for decision making, then it's vitally important for the right decisions to be made at boardroom level. The program provided great insight in terms of trustees and their decision making capabilities. The main learning for me and for the majority of the other cohorts on this was the reporting and the role that farm supervisors played in reporting back to the governance group. Because there were 4 other trust farms, they all used a supervisor, a farm supervisor, and their lack of understanding in terms of the farm and farming systems in play here meant that they lent and they gave a lot of trust to their farm supervisors. But throughout this governance program and also their learnings in our dairy cluster journey, they relied less and less on their farm supervisors for operational matters, and that to me was a huge step forward for us as a people in growing our capability and growing our capacity and making decisions, not based on what someone else has said, but based on the information that was given to those trustees. This was a good back to basics introduction to help us understand what good governance looked like. So usually trustees on Māori land are appointed based on their whakapapa in relationship to shareholders and not the experience and skill set. So that to all of us on in our dairy cluster showed that we have to get away from appointing people based on their relationship, and let's look for skilled and experienced people. It's through diversity that we can bring change and different thinking to the governance level and create better change. We also learned how to identify opportunities and business opportunities. We also learned how to develop a strategic plan. One of the trusts that was involved in the dairy cluster is actually taking that a step further, and they are creating an intergenerational strategic plan, which is going to span 200 years. As I've mentioned before, whenua Māori is a taonga tukuiho. So in 200 years' time, they're hoping to come up with a plan that the next generation can implement and take further. Profitability. As we all know, profitability is always a good benchmark of any good business, and in particularly dairy farming. We have a dairy farming tool here called Dairy Base, which is a benchmarking tool. It's simple to use, gives you great information, and it compares apples with apples in terms of it compares farms of a similar type and in a similar location. The inputs you need to put into it are your financial data and your physical data. Physical data being livestock on the ground, feed to the cows, feed growing, all those inputs that help tell a story of how the farm is performing financially. So we also learned how to do a farm plan, and the farm plans were done via a independent outside body coming in and doing interviews with us. I felt that procedure was very good, as I tend to look at myself quite biasly and put in things that I want to hear and tell a different story. But having someone independent come in, do those interviews with us and help us create a farm plan I felt was very important. Within those farm plans, we looked at the current operations that we were doing. We did a SWOT analysis that helped us identify our strengths and weaknesses, and look at new opportunities. One of those threats that came out of the farm plans for all of us was around training plans for staff. If we think about staff being the left hand and the right hand on farms, then we need to ensure that the left hand and the right hand have the right tools to do the right jobs. We looked at environmental plans and the impacts our farms have on the environment. In New Zealand, we have quite stringent regulations, normally coming from local government or regional councils. A lot of the trustees weren't aware of their legal obligations and just relied on their farm staff to tell their story. In the farm plans, in the farm environmental plans, they identified areas of high risk land. We did an evaluation of our effluent catchments and how we process raw effluent and treat it. Also looked at the resource consents and the new technology that is now becoming available around disposing of effluent on farm. One of the key factors in our area is our people in our community. We have a saying, "Toitu te whenua, toitu te tangata," which means with strong land comes strong people. And the opposite saying of that is "Mawiwi whenua, mawiwi tangata." When the land is sick, so are its people. So as Māori, we're bound to look after our whānau, our rangatahi, and our mokopuna. They make up our local community. So as a dairy farmer here, I milk 180 cows. I employ 3 staff, being myself, my father, and my cousin. I don't know how we can do it, but we afford to pay everyone's wages. And for me, it's not about making millions of dollars. For me, it's about being able to live on the land that I've grown up with, the land of my ancestors. It's about being able to raise my family here and teach them the skills that they need to live off this bit of land. So if by employing my father and my cousin, we're able to keep our family connected, then to me that's huge benefit in that. So we as a people are one of the many variables that relates to our land. If we get it right, we will prosper. And if we get it wrong, it may take decades and if not generations to fix. So having investment in our people and in our community, for me, is a huge advantage. And part of the work we've been doing here in our dairy cluster was with Ag ITO, and that was to get our rangatahi or our youth, our young people, how to engage with them and get them involved in looking after their land and our land. So the key benefits of the cluster. I found the key benefits of the cluster were working collectively, learning from one another, the whānau learning environment, which whānau learning environment. Yeah, so that was about having everyone in the room together from those 5 different farms. The age variance was well, yeah. To be honest, the age variance was pretty out there. So we had 83-year-olds down to, I think the youngest was about 34 in our cluster, and being able to sit next to those old people and hear their stories and hear their learnings was of huge beneficial interest to me. The focus on both governance and management. The cluster catered for the team environment, again, governance. We were able to learn technical aspects of farming. They gave them a better understanding. And now that the trustees are now more informed, they can make better decisions. You took what learning you wanted. So there was a heap of learning that was put out in front of us, but you took what you wanted to take. There's no benefit in trying to eat all that knowledge that was put out in front of you. But if you took what you took, you were able to maintain it in your head a bit better. One of the great benefits out of the dairy cluster was that one of the participants was a finalist in the Ahu Whenua Trophy, which was run last year for Māori dairy business. So Ahu Whenua Trophy is a trophy that promotes farming excellence amongst Māori farmers. They never thought about entering that program, but through the cluster, they gained the confidence, they gained the knowledge, they gained a better understanding of where they were on their farming journey, and they decided to have a go. And by having a go, they were blown away, and they became the finalists, and we were all blown away. And what that goes to show is that if we're able to support each other through all those key opportunities, through governance, profitability, understanding the financial models of your farm plans, then at the end of the day, you've come out with a better understanding of how your farm operates. I was also inspired to watch the growth and development of the group over the 3-year program. Everyone entered that program at different learning levels in terms of their understanding of the agricultural sector. And so to watch them grow and develop was awesome. And as I said before, that growth and development has led to one of our whānau entering the Ahu Whenua Trophy as the finalist. So over the past 3 years, this program has been well worth my participation. It's covered all my values in terms of why I'm here on our whānau land, to look after and care for the environment, the employment side of things, the well-being of our community, the well-being of our land, and unity. These are all values that I uphold as tangata whenua of Aotearoa, and they are things that influence and drive me in my business and the way I live my life. I hope it's easy for you now to see the very strong connection that we as Māori, as tangata whenua, have with our land. Our land is not a resource. It's not to be exploited. It's not here for the short term. The land is an intergenerational treasure. We are here so that our future generations have a brighter future. And taking that last statement as something that I've heard and seen throughout today's presentations, whānau, it's given me, as tangata whenua, it's given me great pleasure to be part of this conference and this kaupapa. Because without our whenua, without our whānau, well, I'll be nothing without their support. And so kia ora whānau, that's my presentation for this evening.
Kia ora, Rika. Thank you so much for that. It's really cool. Do we have any questions for Rika? I don't see any hands up at the moment, but I'm not maybe seeing the full screen. I've got a question, Rika. One of the things that I hear a lot is, how do we keep our young people in the rangatahi in these isolated areas where it is around, you know, the whenua, and being able to reach the aspirations of the whānau through the whenua. So have you got any tips for, you know, again, that we can be sharing wider with people around how to keep rangatahi connected and a place there?
I've found that by bringing rangatahi on farm and showing them the things that their ancestors done, like catching an eel in the creek, weaving a bit of flax, you know, to make a rope, just trying to bring those cultural connections back for me, and not only my family, but having outside groups coming in. Those are the things that I tend to show them, that these are the little treasures that our land holds for us. And if we open our eyes and stop looking at the monetary value of what the benefits can be on land, but actually look at the spiritual connection that we have with our land, and that our ancestors have with our land, that I find is very great to connect with rangatahi.
Cool. The other question is that, again, thinking of Māori and the whenua, and then the product, is there a way that in fact value add can be derived because of the way that Māori are thinking and working with the land and the product? What's your thinking about, you know, what from a marketing, a branding perspective, you know, that value add?
Yeah, so we've seen the likes of Meraka pop up in the last 5 years, and their stakeholder and their stronghold in the dairy industry. So provenance, local stories, tikanga Māori, or all those play a key aspect in terms of marketing products from New Zealand. When I say tikanga Māori, I'm referring to our cultural connection to the land, and so as we know, customers are now paying more importance on the importance of where the product comes from, what value it returns back to its local community. And so if Māori can get together and tell a story that explains the benefits of that to a local community, I believe we can do something along those lines.
That's great. Kia ora, Rika. Thank you so much for your presentation. So I'm going to close that now, and I'm actually going to now hand it over to Jacob and to Megan, because I think they've been listening to all of the conversations, which have been so rich. I mean, this has been so interesting. So Jacob, Megan, some key insights perhaps from you too about the day's presentations and some of the kōrero that we've had around it.
I might go first quickly, if that's okay, Megan. Yep.
Yeah,
obviously, huge diversity in what we've heard today, so it is difficult to wrap up or kind of be able to wrap it up in a 2 or 3 minute conversation. But I've taken some key points from each of these discussions, and where people have said, like Ian coming, that we need to think more of these challenges as, or more like reshape the term market driver, to think of them as opportunities to add more value and to ensure our products remaining viable, attractive and sustainable. Kirsten is saying that we do need profit in order to invest back. And I think that's really important for us to keep that in mind, that we need to stay in the green when being sustainable. Otherwise, it's not going to be sustainable for very long at all. Francesca, looking beyond the obvious and trying to understand the options that are out there, off-paddock infrastructure, agronomic solutions, destocking, what the pros and cons are for each, and what the most viable option is moving forward. Melanie, loved the part about people building sustainable, inclusive, resilient livestock systems. And I think that echoed a fair bit in Kari's presentation as well, that we need to really invest in our people. They are the future, and especially when we hear from Rika, the connection that people can have to their land, and that it is such a special gift. I think that goes to show that the people are key to the sustainable livestock for the future and the sustainable industry. And Margaret, of course, these opportunities of what's happening within the carbon space and all the opportunities within genetics, research, vegetation management, the sustainability is a key driver to the industry's change. That's probably as good as I can get. I'm really looking forward to watching the recording again so I can try and understand and really, I guess, take in more of what was happening today. And I really look forward to sharing that at the MSP in Dublin. But Megan, I'll pass over to you.
Thank you. I think always rough to go second insights, but what a really what a journey that the conversation has been, and was excited after being a little bit down that the problem might be us old people, to then hear that women aged 35 to 50 are also the solution. So I feel like we've come up good in the end. Reflecting on what Shirley started us out with as that global goal for us all, the global perspective we need to take. So she talked about needing to support assembling evidence, and I thought that Francesca did a spectacular job presenting the approach to Plantain and how that as a tool needs to be understood, and that those measurements need to be available to build that trust. She talked to us about dialogue and opening that dialogue, and I thought Melanie did an amazing job of talking about the networks and the people and the importance of building on those people the whole way through. Fostering ambitions. So Christine was incredible, talking about disrupting yourself and that braveness to stand up in your own business and disrupt yourself, I thought was really inspirational. Practice change, seeing Margaret talk about the whole focus and direction on an industry as a whole, and her challenges to pick that bigger picture up instead of having to go piece by piece. So excitement about what some of those initiatives could deliver. Then what are our key challenges? And it was so cool seeing Kari talk about how the young people are building those pathways to excitement about our industry, building the different types of skills, soft skills and career pathways. You know, it isn't just being out carving with my husband at 4 in that gets you in and excited in agriculture. And then I thought a beautiful holistic finish with toitu te whenua, toitu te tangata. When the whenua, the land is strong, so are we, our people. So kia ora rika, what a beautiful piece around the intergenerational taonga, the treasure that is the whenua. And while we have these challenges to face, what a privilege to get to face it together. So yeah, wonderful conversation to hear, Liz.
Oh, thank you both, Jacob and Megan. Those are very special. So I just would like to thank everyone, particularly the presenters. You've done a superb job in 10 minutes to get your main points across. And to you, the participants who have been listening, and I hope you're going to go now and sort of really reflect on particularly, there's so many similarities, I think, that we've heard today. And and the Global Agenda has sponsored, I think it's 7 people from Oceania to go to Dublin. And I know that you 7 are just going to blow the socks off of people there. Thank you to Eduardo and to the Food and Agriculture Organisation, who are the Secretariat for GASL. They set up the Zoom, and I see it's been recording. So this recording will go on to the GASL website, and when it's up there, I'll inform people of that. But really, again, many thanks. Thank you for keeping to time. Thanks, Jacob and Megan and Rory, for keeping it all going. And have a great day. All keep dry, keep safe. And yeah, ka kite. Thank you.
Thank you, Liz.
Goodbye.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.